There's a specific smell to expired food that I don't think I can describe to you if you haven't encountered it in a particular way. Not the sharp rot of something truly gone. That's a different smell, when you reject immediately and instinctively. I'm talking about the smell of food that is almost fine. Food that has crossed some invisible bureaucratic line on a calendar and been sentenced to a black trash bag behind a Kroger in Dayton, Ohio, even though it has maybe 4 or 5 days left in it. Maybe more. Bread that's just starting to harden at the edges. Yogurt that's a week past its sell-by but perfectly sealed. Dented cans of soup that got pulled from the shelf because the dent made them unfit for purchase, not consumption. I know that smell the way some kids know the smell of their grandmother's kitchen or fresh cut grass on a Little League field. It is, in a very literal way, the smell of my childhood. My mother was not a bad person. I need to say that first before I say anything else, because this story could easily become one where she's the villain and I'm the survivor, and that's not what happened. My mother was a person who got hit by several very large, very fast-moving things in rapid succession, and she didn't have the resources, financial, emotional, structural, to absorb any of them. By the time I was 7, she was raising me and my younger sister alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of Dayton that doesn't appear in any Chamber of Commerce brochures. My father had left when I was 5. Not dramatically, not with a fight, he just thinned out over about 6 months and then was gone completely, like a fog burning off. He sent a card on my birthday for 2 years and then stopped doing even that. My mom worked at a laundromat. She worked the morning shift, 6 to 2, and she'd come home smelling like dryer sheets and look in the refrigerator with an expression I couldn't name then, but can name perfectly now. Calculus. She was doing math in her head every time she opened that door. What we had, what we needed, what the gap was, and how to bridge it. The dumpster was her solution to part of that gap. She found out about it from a woman at the laundromat, another regular, a grandmother raising 3 grandkids on a fixed income, who told my mom that the Kroger on Smithville Road threw out perfectly good food every Tuesday and Friday evening, about an hour before close. Not in an accessible way necessarily, but not in an impossible way either. The dumpster was in a back lot that wasn't actively monitored. If you came after 8 and were quick and quiet, you could fill 2 or 3 bags without incident. I was 9 the first time she brought me. She gave it to me straight, the way she gave me most things. We're going to get food. It's in the back of the store. It's still good. It's just food they can't sell anymore. It's not dangerous and it's not wrong. It's just what we're doing. I nodded. I didn't fully understand, but I understood enough. We brought a flashlight and 2 reusable bags, the canvas kind, and she boosted me up to look inside while she held the flashlight, and I told her what I saw, and she told me what to grab. We did this for 3 years, roughly, not every week, but often. It supplemented what she bought with food stamps and the occasional help from her sister, my Aunt Rosalie, who lived 40 minutes away and would sometimes show up on a Sunday with a trunk full of groceries and a casserole in the particular strange cheerfulness of someone trying very hard not to make you feel pitied. Here's the thing about growing up like that, the thing nobody really explains. It doesn't feel like a crisis when you're in it. It just feels like life. The crisis framing is something you apply later, from a distance, with the perspective that comes from having lived differently afterward. At the time, I was just a kid. I went to school, I had a best friend named Marcus who lived 2 streets over and whose family had a Sega Genesis that I played more hours on than I can count. I collected baseball cards. I ate dumpster bread with peanut butter and thought about nothing in particular. What I did develop, quietly and without knowing it, was a very specific relationship with scarcity. Not fear, exactly, more like vigilance. A constant low-frequency awareness of resources, what we had, what we didn't, what things cost, what things were worth. I could tell you at any given moment how much was left in a box of cereal. I finished everything on my plate, always. Not because I was told to, but because wasting food felt physically uncomfortable, like a small wrongness I couldn't ignore. I noticed prices. I noticed when things ran out. I noticed when they didn't. My teachers noticed other things about me. My fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Okafor, a compact Nigerian-American woman with an enormous laugh and very little patience for nonsense, told my mother at a conference that I had an unusual facility for numbers. She doesn't just calculate, she thinks in numbers. She turns everything into a problem to be solved. My mother told me this years later with a pride that was slightly dampened by the fact that she had to take 2 buses to get to that conference and been 40 minutes late. I wasn't a prodigy. I want to be clear about that because I've noticed a tendency in stories like mine to reach backward and find the signs of genius, to retroactively justify the outcome. I was a smart kid with a strong aptitude for math and a home environment that accidentally trained me to think about resources and efficiency and optimization from the time I could reach a dumpster. That's different from prodigy. That's circumstance pointing in a particular direction. Middle school, high school, I pushed through both on a combination of decent grades, a few good teachers who took an interest, and the kind of quiet determination that comes from not ambition exactly, but a bone-deep awareness that the alternative is going backwards. I got a partial scholarship to Ohio State. I took out loans for the rest. I worked 20 hours a week at a campus library, reshelving books, which is actually a beautiful job if you don't mind silence and you like the feeling of things being in order. I studied business and computer science, not because I had a grand vision, but because it seemed like the combination most likely to convert into income. I was practical in the way that people who grew up with nothing tend to be practical. Romantically immune, economically focused, and suspicious of anything that sounded like a shortcut, because shortcuts were usually traps. The idea for the company came in the spring semester of my junior year, from a problem I was having personally. I was coordinating my own schedule across 3 part-time jobs, a full course load, and a handful of freelance data entry projects I'd picked up through a university job board. Keeping track of it was genuinely chaotic, not because I was disorganized, but because the tools available for managing this kind of multi-source, irregular schedule were built for people with one job and a predictable routine. There was nothing that handled the kind of patchwork, gig-adjacent scheduling that increasingly described not just my life, but the lives of most people I knew in college. So I built something. Not a company yet, just a tool, a simple web app I coded myself over about 3 weeks of late nights that could pull from multiple scheduling sources, flag conflicts, optimize around your priorities, and send you a plain language daily summary of what you needed to do and when. I posted about it on a few subreddits. I put it on Product Hunt. I sent cold emails to every startup I could find whose team might include people juggling erotic schedules. I priced it at $7 a month because that was what I had calculated was the minimum revenue per user to make the math work. The first month, I got 40 paying users. I thought that was incredible. The second month, I got 180. By the end of the year, I had 2,400 monthly subscribers and had graduated college and deferred 2 job offers to see if the thing could grow. I'm going to skip the middle years, not because they're unimportant, but because they're long and complicated and involve a lot of decisions that were part intuition and part desperation and part luck. And if I detail all of them, we'll be here until next Tuesday. The short version is, I raised a small seed round from an angel investor I met at a Columbus startup event who believed in the product and, I think, in the chip he could see on my shoulder. I hired carefully, slowly, always sweating the cash position, always treating revenue like the precious and finite thing I knew it to be. I expanded the product from individual scheduling to team-based workforce coordination, which is where the real market was. Mid-sized businesses with shift workers, contractors, gig employees, anyone whose schedule was complicated and whose management software hadn't caught up. The company grew. Not overnight, over 6 years, slowly and with enormous effort and several moments where I genuinely was not sure we were going to make payroll. I had a team of 34 people by year 5. We had over 12,000 business clients. We had been approached by 2 larger companies about acquisition, and I had turned both down, not because the offers were bad, but because I wasn't done yet. I knew the product could be bigger. I knew we were on the edge of something, and I had learned, in a dumpster behind a Kroger at age 9, to not leave useful things behind just because someone else had decided they were finished. The third acquisition offer came from a workforce management software company headquartered in Austin. They were publicly traded, well capitalized, and very serious. The number they put on the table during the first call made me set down my coffee cup and stare at the wall for about 4 seconds before I said, carefully, "Tell me more about the structure." $22 million. My stake, after dilution and the buyout of my early investors, came to just over 14 million. This is the part of the story where I'm supposed to tell you what it felt like, and I've tried many times to find the right words for it. It felt like nothing. That's the honest answer. It felt like absolutely nothing. Not in a disappointed way, I want to be clear about that. It wasn't emptiness or disillusionment. It was more that the number was so far outside my referential frame that it couldn't produce a feeling. I had grown up in an apartment where we sometimes ran out of toilet paper and rationed it across the last few days of the month. My brain simply did not have the circuitry to feel $14 million. It was an abstraction, a string of digits that I kept looking at on documents, waiting for some emotion to arrive, and mostly just finding more math. The emotion came later, in strange and specific moments that had nothing to do with the money itself. It came when I called my mother. She was 58 by then, still in Dayton, retired from the laundromat after her knees went bad, living in a slightly better apartment than the one we'd grown up in. I told her the company had sold. I told her what I was going to do, buy her a house. Not a mansion, nothing absurd, a real house in a neighborhood she'd always liked, with a yard and a garage and a furnace that worked properly. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "You don't have to do that, baby." And I said, "I know, that's the whole point." She cried. I stayed on the phone and listened to her cry, and something in my chest that had been tightly coiled for about 25 years released about half a turn. It came when I went grocery shopping the first time after the money cleared. I was in a Whole Foods in Austin, I'd moved there by then, and I stood in the bread aisle for probably 4 minutes. There were 17 kinds of bread. 17. I could buy all of them without it mattering. I could buy all of them and throw them in the trash and it wouldn't register as a rounding error. I stood there and felt my heart rate go up in a way that made no logical sense and had to physically remind myself, you can buy the bread. You can buy any bread. You can buy all the bread. I bought 2 loaves. I finished both completely before I bought more. I still do that. I don't buy food I haven't used yet. I finish things before I replace them. My refrigerator is organized with a precision that my girlfriend finds slightly alarming and I find completely non-negotiable. I check expiration dates, not because I need to, but because not checking them produces a low-grade anxiety that I've simply stopped trying to argue myself out of. I've talked to a therapist about this. She's kind and patient and frames it in terms of adaptive behaviors that outlive their context, which I think is a generous way of saying your brain got very good at surviving a specific environment, and then the environment changed, but the brain didn't fully get the memo. I appreciate the framing. I don't think it'll ever fully go away, and honestly, I'm not sure I want it to. Here's what I've figured out about money. Having spent my entire childhood without it, and a portion of my adulthood with more of it than I can meaningfully spend, it solves the problems it's supposed to solve, the material ones, the toilet paper and the heating bill and the bread. It removes a category of suffering that is very real and very grinding and should not be romanticized. Poverty is not character building. It is just hard, and the hardness leaves marks, and some of those marks look like discipline from the outside and feel like hypervigilance and unshakable anxiety from the inside. But it doesn't solve the other problems, the ones that weren't about money to begin with. The loneliness of a kid who felt different because he knew his lunch was different. The specific social calculus of pretending things are fine. The habit of self-sufficiency so ingrained that asking for help still feels even now like a kind of failure. I'm working on those separately. My mom's house has a yard. She planted tomatoes last summer, which she'd always wanted to do but never had the space for. She sent me a photo in July, a small colander of small, imperfect, deeply red tomatoes sitting on her new kitchen counter. I've looked at that photo probably 50 times. It's my lock screen. I'm 34 years old. I have $14 million and a refrigerator organized by expiration date and a mother with tomatoes in her yard and a scar on my right palm from a dumpster lodge when I was 11 years old that I've never once wished away. It's the most honest thing about me. It's proof of the equation, the one I've been running my whole life. You take what's available, you waste nothing, and you keep going. I'm still running it. The numbers are just different now.